pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councillor Ledeen.
Here.
Councillor Van Sickle. Here. Councillor Bender.
Here.
Councillor Sweeney.
Here.
Councillor Fennessy.
Here.
Councillor Elm.
Here.
Councillor Ludwig.
Here.
Councillor Sutherland.
Here.
Councillor Kern.
He's here.
Kern.
Here.
And Councillor Dahlbeck.
Here.
We have a quorum. And councilors, just a reminder, we are starting our new agenda format. It shouldn't be too clunky for us tonight. If at any time you have a question of how this is working, if anything seems confusing, don't be afraid to say a point of information and we'll interrupt and answer your question.
The first item is approval of the minutes from the August 18th meeting.
So moved.
The motion is by Councilor Bender, the second by Councilor Fennessy. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries.
Item number 5 are correspondence to be filed.
This does not require action. We can move to, again, the correspondence, counselors, it's items that you are receiving either way. So you don't need to receive and file that. This is just there so you know that it has come to council. And by the way, if you see something up here, there's often interesting information, like some department head reports that were presented to committees will appear here. So if you're ever interested to see something, leave us a note, shoot us a quick email, we'll get that along to you.
Item number 6.1 is the mayor's report.
Okay, councilors, I'm going to give this as a report at every meeting just of what the administration has been up to in the last 2 weeks, but I'm going to spare you that for now, especially since I have a plan commission report coming up. What I'm going to use my time for today is to present the 2021 general fund budget. And for procedure's sake, I will get through the presentation and then we will move on to the parliamentary business. But I will present, we will have opportunity for you to ask me questions. Then I will come back, resume the chair, and we will dispense with whatever business you want to take on these proposals. Okay, Madam President and councilors, it is officially my honor to present to you the 2021 General Fund, but I will be presenting 2 other proposals to you tonight as well. I'm also going to be proposing our 2021 through 25 CIP and the surplus proposal from 2019. The CIP is technically already in effect, but we will need a fully approved and updated CIP to reflect all of the changes that we've made in the last few months and intend to make going forward. That is due by October 25th, but that's your deadline, not mine. You must pass it by October 25th according to the ordinances. There's probably some wiggle room in interpretation there, but I want you to be aware of it saying that in the ordinances. The general fund I'm obligated to present today. You do not have an obligation to pass that tonight, and in fact I will encourage you not to. I'll go over that a little bit more later. And finally, the surplus from 2019. We ended 2019 with a surplus of a few $100,000, and if you'll remember, we changed our ordinances for how that will work. Previously, the city code required that be divided automatically to certain key funds. Now, if our general fund reserves are at or above 32% of our operating expenses, the mayor is required to present before the end of the year, so before the end of 2020, a proposal for how that should be spent. I'm going to present that proposal to you tonight. The first thing, we're going to go through the general fund first, and then I'll get to the other proposals. So the first aspect of the general fund, you'll remember that we have been trying to put out a full comprehensive book, not just for you to read and understand the budget, but for the public at large to understand it. One of the funnest parts of this process is we hold a photo contest among the staff to choose the cover of the budget book. It is fiercely competitive. We put it to a vote of the finance department. There's often deep disagreement within the administration, and I unilaterally choose the cover at the end of it. So I am pleased to present to you the winner of 5 choices. We have 5 submissions among staff and some elected officials, and the winner is actually Councillor Tyler Elm submitted this budget book cover, and personally I just liked it because it shows all aspects of Superior. So congratulations and thank you, Councillor Elm. Let's jump into the business here. This was our process creating the general fund this year. It started in the early summer with department heads drafting their own budgets. This is something I've asked department heads to do throughout my administration. They wrote what they felt needed to be funded. For the most part, these can be status quo budgets where they just try to do the same things. We do, of course, help them with that. Finance supplies a lot of their numbers. But this is also an opportunity for them to identify what their goals might be in the coming year. Where this was a little different, because of COVID, we weren't able to have our usual retreat where we spent an entire day talking about each department's accomplishments and their goals and vision for the coming year. But they did have the opportunity to at least do it themselves and present it later. Then throughout that time, finance is collecting the revenue estimates so that we can get a sense of how much money we have to spend. Then we do the really hard work. This is the headache-inducing stuff where the calendar is entirely clear, and we have a team consisting of the finance director, chief of staff, and myself that meets with each department to review their proposals. This is without a doubt the most stressful part of the process because this is where most cuts happen. When departments bring new proposals, I remove those immediately from their proposed budgets and I set them aside. That goes to you later, but if they go in at all, they come in at the very end and they usually don't know it until right about the same time you do. Once that's complete, we get a sense of how close we are to our revenue. But that's the point, before we really know where it's going to land, that I asked this year I asked you to submit whatever priorities you might have for the coming year for the general fund, and in this case the CIP as well. And then once those came back, we kind of went to the last stage where we mashed it all together. We looked at what the highest priorities were. We went back, did more cuts, and messed with revenue to try and make everything add up so that our priorities are funded, so that the services that citizens expect continue to be funded, and we are responsibly allocating the revenue that raising and allocating the revenue that we have. This then is where it landed. The 2021 expenditure budget that I propose is $31,461,701. This slide looks different than you've seen it in previous years. These are the actual amounts, if you're able to see them. They are also in the budget book. Mr. Raverty sent you a draft of our budget book just before this meeting. You can follow along in that if you want. That will go through some changes, and we're open to your suggestions for that before that is published for the public. But not too many surprises in there from what you'll see tonight. This pie chart, we changed the way it's structured. In previous years, we would have shown every department on this chart, and obviously that's going to show dozens of little pie slices, and it's almost impossible to read. I'm going to go ahead to the next one where it shows percentages, and that gives a better picture of how the tax dollar is spent. So when you're speaking to constituents, this is the one that says every dollar is divided this way, and what you'll see is a pretty stark picture that 2/3 of the tax dollar in the city of Superior goes to a combination of public safety and public works. We protect the public and we build infrastructure. That is the business of the city of Superior. Everything else is extra on top of that. Obviously, there's a lot of obligation in there as well. But the other number that I wanted to call your attention to was debt service. If I'm looking at my colors right, it's a little hard from here. It's 9.64%. Paying 10% towards debt service might seem like a lot, but and I want to be careful about oversimplistic metaphors here. I've never liked the idea of comparing a government budget to a household budget, but if you did, I would ask you to even think about your own personal budgets or those of people that you know and ask how much goes to paying for debt of any kind, your mortgage, your car payment, student loans, credit cards, anything. Most Americans have a debt profile much larger than 10% of their expenditures. In fact, most financial advisors recommend your mortgage can be up to 28% of your income. But we will come to debt service again. Obviously, our 2021 general fund revenue, this is a balanced budget, and so it matches to the dollar. It is required to be a balanced budget. We can't spend any more than we've raised. However, as you'll see later on, or you may have noticed already in your full packets, we do have a contingency in this budget for, of course, events that might come up throughout the year. This is just breaking down the general fund revenue by percentage. It's the same chart as before, but it's by percentage. I'm going to back up because the amounts, again, tell a pretty telling story. The vast majority of our revenue comes from two sources, the property tax levy and state shared revenue. And I want to linger on this point for just a minute because you may have seen in the news that the state of Wisconsin is in something of a fiscal crisis following COVID. I have said before, and I will say again tonight, that the finances of the city of Superior are very strong. Our economy is very strong and improving, but we are clearly very dependent to the tune of 25% of our revenue on shared revenue. If you'll indulge me, I'll give you just a little bit of history on what shared revenue is. This is a program that was largely invented by the state of Wisconsin. It was a progressive policy designed to create what was called taxpayer fairness. The idea was if communities levy most of their revenue on the property tax, that means that communities that have a higher equalized value will charge their taxpayers less. Wealthy communities, just by virtue of the fact that they are larger and they have more valuable property, don't have to pay as much taxes as a community that doesn't have as high a median income or doesn't have as high property value. What that means, in fact, is that you pay more for the exact same service if your city is worth less. If you are a working class community like Superior, Wisconsin, compared to a wealthier city in Wisconsin, a police officer costs the taxpayer more here than in another place. So the state of Wisconsin, in a very progressive move that was later copied by a number of states in the United States, started taking income tax money and allocating that on a formula based on the relative values of the communities in Wisconsin to each other. And if you're following me, what that meant is that this program allowed for a civil service, like a police officer or a firefighter or a snowplow, to cost the taxpayer the same amount in every single city, town, village, and county in the state of Wisconsin. That was until about the turn of the century, which is a phrase we can start using now, I guess, when the state legislature found the formula overcomplicated for reasons I've never understood and froze it. They no longer started allocating it based on our relative values to each other and just started giving us the same amount year over year, regardless of changes in our community. The point of shared revenue is that if our community gets more valuable, if our economy improves, that number should go down. If there's more taxpayers and more wealth in our community, taxpayers can handle more. That's the point. That's not what's happening anymore. We're getting the same no matter what. Then something even more sinister happened. The legislature started cutting shared revenue year over year. So that's it's remained relatively stable. Governor Evers' first budget actually proposed an increase, which the legislature scaled back. But we project about the same, except what I mentioned earlier, Wisconsin has a very critical budget shortfall. And what they have mentioned is that one of the possibilities for meeting that shortfall is a cut to shared revenue. This is obviously very concerning for the city of Superior, not just because it impacts 25% of our revenue, but because we don't know what it is. They haven't said how much they're going to cut it by, haven't given us a percentage. They haven't said when they're going to do it. They haven't even fully committed to doing it. It might not actually happen. So under that cloud of uncertainty, we can't even make a guess at what that's going to be. So we just stuck with what we had before. This is something that we will have to keep in mind throughout the rest of this year and next. There are a couple reasons to be at least a little hopeful. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities has asked the legislature to delay any cuts until the 2022 fiscal year to allow communities time to prepare. I fully support that recommendation. We need to know what's coming from the state for us to adequately prepare for budgets. Any cut to shared revenue at this point would be very difficult for us to manage. We can manage it if and when it comes, though. The final point I want to mention is if the worst happened and a significant amount of this money was cut. Again, I'll just show you. This is $7.7 million. If they were to cut that back by $1 million plus, we don't have a way to meet that. We can't make cuts to cover $1 million shortfall in the general fund. That would be what I've warned many of you about for years. That would be when we use our reserves. We have very healthy general fund reserves, and the purpose of those is twofold. Of course, to cover any budget deficit if unforeseen circumstances drove us into a deficit, but it's also those big things that we can't possibly predict. This would be one of them. While that's a scary thing waiting in our future, I feel fairly confident that we can work the political process. There is some good news that just came out of the state of Wisconsin today. Their revenue estimates, they pulled in more revenue than they budgeted for, and so their fiscal situation may not be quite as dire as possible, and the hope is that this just impacts Superior minimally. We are prepared, but obviously that's going to be a bad day when it happens. Okay, I'm going to briefly pass this over to Finance Director Putz to speak about our debt profile.
Perfect, thank you. So I broke out our debt into three different types, and it could really be broken down more depending on how you want to look at it. But the first main type of debt that we have would be what I consider the debt levy. So the $32.7 million is the amount of debt that you see budgeted for in the general fund. It is that is the value of the debt that we're paying on. Next up is the tax increment bonds inside our TID districts, and those are paid with tax increments, so they're technically levied for, but it's outside of what's budgeted for in the general fund. So they're paid basically the same way, but they're structured a little bit differently, so they're worth calling out, and that's almost $3 million worth. And then our remaining debt is all paid by our enterprise funds, and they're broken down. Some of them are technically general obligation debt, which means that they could be levied for in the event the enterprise fund can't pay for them, but we have very healthy enterprise funds, and we pay all of the debt inside of them with user fees. And then we do have limits to how much we can increase our debt by. And the debt limits, you'll see, I'll kind of skip around to the bottom, the $39,286,000. That is the amount of our debt that is subject to limit. So if you were adding up the amounts on the last slide, they do not add up to equal $39 million. And actually, I'll flip back quick. Oh, how did I do that? So if you were trying to get to the 39, you would add up the 32 million plus the 3 million, and then parts of the enterprise fund to get to that $39 million amount. And so statutorily, we are allowed to have up to 89, so you can see we're well within our ability to have that debt at this point, and that's just based on, it's 5% of the equalized value, so that number is on the slide there for you. It's about $1.8 million. And then the city has self-imposed a lower limit. We say we're only going to do 60% of the state statute. So we say 3% of the equalized value, so 53 million is what we would hold ourselves to, and again, we're well below that limit as well.
Okay, so as you remember, you all submitted your general fund priorities. This is going to be hard to read no matter what document you see it in, so I'll try to read it for you if you can't actually read it, and I think you should have it in the budget book as well. I found that a little easier to read. The general fund priorities that came back were pretty telling. There was a lot of consensus that formed among the council. I broke it out in a couple of different ways. Of course, you feel free to look at this and pick apart and analyze however that shook out. I didn't spend too much time looking at the people, but in the budget book, you will see the listing of the priorities of every individual counselor. And of course, that's listed here as well. Not only what you prioritized, but what your rank was. The top two items were very decisively for the police department, and most decisively was adding a social worker to the police department. That was, not only did that have the most amount of points, but 7 of the 10 counselors voted for that. The police training was not far behind. You'll see an asterisk. Counselor Sweeney prioritized this as number 1, but said he wanted to prioritize all training throughout the city. And so this is part of that all. And I just want to respond briefly, Counselor, that while there was an increase in a lot of training throughout the city, when you start digging into it, in many departments, it's not a matter of affording the training the way it is in the public safety units. It's more a matter of time. The staff are usually saying that they don't have the time to get to training in their departments, but we're going to make that a policy initiative where I've been asking them, we need to get to at least 1 training for every professional staff in the city a year. The hope is that we're able to start doing that very early in traveling for training very early in 2021. The next 2 items that are also funded in this budget are an increase in mass transit funding and a 2% salary increase. Both of those had the support of a majority of the counselors. They're clustered pretty closely together in terms of their point value. And below that, it starts dropping down pretty precipitously. That's not to say we didn't fund anything on the rest of that list, but those top 4 really stuck out as the 4 major priorities of the council, and that they have a lot of points, and a majority of the council supported them. So this is the exciting part of the budget, what we are adding to it, the significant initiatives. First, of course, we are funding a police department social worker. I want to warn you that this is not something, we're not going to have a social worker start work on January 1st, 2021. This is a very significant policy initiative, and it will take a lot of work by our police department and by our public safety committee to tell us what this is going to look like. We have to look at what other cities are doing, if anybody else has done anything similar to this. We have to have a very real conversation about what our values are and our goals for not just this position, but the future of the department, if we're going to be adding other forms of professional officers into that department. So this is going to be a process, and I really don't expect to hire anybody before July 1st at the very earliest. I mean, even after public safety decides how they want this to look, the Human Resource Committee is going to have to weigh in pretty extensively as well. It's going to take a lot of work, but quite frankly, this was my highest priority as well, and I was very pleased to see this get as much support as it did from the council. I think this is going to really make the city of Superior stand out as one of the most professional, diverse, and responsive police departments in the state of Wisconsin. Second, we are also increasing police department training. This is the largest, we looked this up as best we could with all the documents we had. This is the largest increase in police department training in the history of the city. It won't seem like very much, it's about $10,000, but in terms of a training budget, that's quite a bit. It's a 21% increase, I believe, from last year, but I want you to compare it to the previous years as well. We've been steadily increasing police training and in our budget so that and from year to year. So this is not just 10,000 this year, it's tens of thousands over the last few years of new investment in training. And the reason for that is because we want to go beyond just what we've done before. It starts with making sure that officers have competence and maintain those competencies throughout their careers. That's pretty standard of any police department. Our police chief has been very innovative and progressive in finding new trainings that really expand the professional mindset of our officers, like crisis intervention, de-escalation training, and implicit bias. But those are one-time trainings. That doesn't change the nature of police work in our department. It changes the way you think a little bit, ask some tough questions. The next step is to very seriously invest in training and make the department as professional as it can possibly be. I had a conversation about training with Captain Winterscheidt and the police chief recently about a potential training initiative that we're bringing, and we had a free-flowing conversation about it, and we spoke about how other types of professionals train every day. They train all the time. Imagine an Olympic athlete that doesn't train every day. Imagine a high school athlete that doesn't train every day of the sport season. That was Captain Wintersight's example, that a varsity football player, I believe his son plays football, has significantly more training at football than our police officers do at policing. We want to get to that level of proficiency. We want to have not just a good police force, not just the best police force we can have, but the best in the state of Wisconsin and among the best in the country. And the way we do that is an aggressive new investment in training. I should point out, this is not just a cost. This is also an investment. When our police officers become highly skilled professionals, they don't just know these new initiatives, they become trainers themselves. And when our police officers are professionals in different types of policing, in specialized skills, other departments come to us and they pay us to train their officers. That is also true if we make investments in equipment, which I'll get to a little bit later. Increasing mass transit. This is a small investment. I think it's I can't remember if it was 25 or 35,000. This does not add a route to the city of Superior. What this would do is expand an existing route in some way. It would either add an hour before or after another stop at the end or at the beginning of the day, or it would add a stop on the half hour at some point during a busy time. And we would not do this immediately. We do have a study out looking at our routes that will engage some public opinion and look at how we can best serve the community. I also want to point out that this is a pretty significant economic development initiative. One of the major challenges that manufacturers have been experiencing in the city of Superior is access to workers. And a number of them have outright said they don't have adequate public transportation to bring employees to work on a reliable basis. It's really tough to ride the bus in Duluth and Superior. And so we're just going to try and make that a little bit easier. This stands out, a 1.5% salary increase. Historically, we have had a 2% salary increase for most years. As we got to that final stage of the budget, we had budgeted till the very end for a 2% salary increase, but of course, and again, this is non-represented employees. When we looked at the state of the city, we found that 60% of our employees still are still in the STEP program. 60% of our employees will automatically get a 2.5% increase once they finish their employee evaluations. Most other communities, we have a soft survey that our human resource director conducted of other municipalities in Wisconsin, and most are uncertain about what they'll do, but there was a lot of diversity in what people are doing. Very few were over 2%. Most, I believe, were under 2%. Many were not raising salaries at all, and several were even freezing their step increases, largely in response to COVID. Locally, Douglas County is is projecting a 1% salary increase, which is consistent over the past few years. This helped balance the budget in the end. I'm proposing eliminating library late fees. I don't have a lot to say about this. I said most of it at our previous session. This costs about $10,000, wipes out the library would waive existing late fees, and they would no longer charge late fees in the future. We would, of course, this would be the new cost of the library assessment. We'd have to pay this every year. But again, we have hundreds of people, including 100 children, that aren't allowed to check out books right now. And there's never really been any evidence that the late fee is incentivizing people to bring their books back on time. Duluth already did this last year, and so this feels like a simple, productive service we can provide to the people of Superior, especially after we've seen during the time of COVID just how popular that library was. We have a lot of community engagement with that service, and so I'd like to provide that just a little bit easier on people. Finally, I'm proposing increasing the parks crew, removing 3 summer seasonal positions and adding 1 year-round full-time position. So that will be a reduction, but it will be a net increase to the budget of about $35,000. The purpose for this is multifold. First and foremost, it fills the position. We added those seasonals a few years ago, but it's been so difficult filling seasonal positions, especially in the summer, that nobody's working the job right now. And so the parks crew, even though we had good intentions of trying to make life easier on them and get more work done for citizens, it's not happening because nobody's in those jobs. If it's a full-time benefited position, we're more likely to get somebody and to keep somebody and to reduce turnover. We can meet the original goal of those seasonals in the first place, which was trail building. Originally, we hired them for assuming it would be just a couple of years to help build the Wisconsin Point Trail. But as that trail has been built and the crew has discovered that they're actually pretty good at building trails, and we have a lot of forests left in the city of Superior. We have existing trails that we need to maintain. So that's a service that I know the citizens of Superior are very excited about, and I think if we can continue to do that work, our community would appreciate it. But in addition to that, there's a lot of other parks work that needs to be done that you do hear from your constituents about. We need to empty the trash cans more often. We need to mow the lawn more often. We need to get to all of those services that we provide to just have nicer spaces in the city of Superior. But where it really starts to matter is winter. When we have a full-time person, we can ask that they have a CDL. That makes them more versatile. They can work on all of the equipment within the Parks Department. They can work on all the equipment within the Public Works Department. So if we want to take on an initiative like the Public Works Committee's discussed to clear all of our safe routes to school, which I'm proposing that we do, we need more staff to do that. The parks crew already clears some of our safe routes to school. They just don't do it all. By adding staff in the winter, they can do all of it, especially if they have extra equipment. But the real reason, and this is not the policy reason, but something to remember, throughout all of our winter operations, I don't think any of us are going to forget the Thanksgiving storm of 2019 for a very long time. Throughout that time, about every constituent you heard from asked, why can't we do this better? All of you were thinking, how can we do this better? Part of the way we do it better is having more staff that can respond more quickly. When I asked Director Janigo about this, we weren't short on equipment. We had the trucks necessary to do that job faster than we did. We didn't have the bodies to drive those trucks. And if we have an extra parks crew staff with a CDL, that's one more person that can join during a snow emergency. But I want to be clear, this is not somebody that's just going to be on the plow trucks all winter. This is somebody that's doing snow clearing for the Parks Department. They'll focus on safe routes to school, and then they will pursue the priorities of our Parks Department and our Parks and Rec Commission to clear out recreational resources, park paths, ice rinks, etc. And I will pass it back to Ashley for the bond rating.
So this is a slide I think most of you have probably seen a couple times before, but it's just a good reminder to reiterate that our bond rating is a AA, and it's super important. It's what allows us to borrow debt at good interest rates. And if you want to flip to the next slide, thank you. And this is just the breakdown of why Standard & Poor's is giving us a AA rating. And it's because we have good budgetary flexibility, we have high liquidity, our reserves are strong, and in the strong category, that they're happy with our policies. And ultimately, one of the things that they say, it's largely out of our control, but we're ranked adequate in economy. And so unless the values of the homes are going up and people are making a lot more money, that's an area that would ultimately would help push us up significantly if that was something we could move. And that's just a quick snap at the bond rating's important.
So this is what's next. Tonight, I am not recommending you pass this budget. I would be very surprised if you took any action at all other than to postpone until the next council meeting. That will be my recommendation to you. However, you may take action. That is your right. What I'm asking is that this be postponed until the September 15th meeting of the Common Council. In between that time, I'm asking each of you to set up a time to meet with me over digitally, in person, or over the phone to discuss the budget. I can promise you all have questions. We'll answer whatever we can tonight, but you have a lot of homework to do with this. You have a lot to look at. Come up with questions. This is an extremely challenging document and is the most significant policy we will pass all year. I asked questions about this budget today, and I've been working on it for months. So please set that meeting. If you want to see changes, let's talk about those. If there are things that are really bothering you, let's talk about those too, because I think we're going to be marching down a timeline fairly quickly, and I'd like us to build as much consensus as possible, and I want to make sure we have a budget that works for this entire council. The September 15th meeting is our first, I think, real opportunity to pass this. If we've done good work in the next 2 weeks, we could potentially pass this budget. There will be changes. We have a number of estimates and projections in this budget. That is true every year, just simply by the fact that our ordinance requires us to present it early in the fall. So some numbers are still coming in, and as we get those, we will propose those changes at the top of that meeting. October 6th is really your deadline to pass this. There have been a few years in my time here, maybe one, where we took advantage of that extra meeting. So if you need it, you've got it. But again, we should really try and get this done by October 15th because by September 15th, because on October 6th, we have to set the public hearing. On November 4th, we will hold the public hearing on the budget. And then on November 10th, we will submit the tax levy, the finance department will begin work on the tax levy, and then in December, the tax rolls are due to Douglas County. Okay, we are going to move on to the CIP and the surplus proposal, but first, I'm just going to pause. Are there any questions about the general fund that I can answer right now? Again, these all tie together, but I should take a minute and answer any questions that I can. Councilor Lund, please.
Thanks for the presentation, Mayor. When it comes to the cuts, can you elaborate on that? The mayor's budget, we had a $32,000 cut. The public works shop was $128,000. City attorney was $45,000. Can you kind of elaborate on all the cuts that are being made?
Good questions. I'll try and remember those in order. The mayor's office, there were 2 cuts that you would notice. The first is we traded out a chief of staff at the top of the pay scale for one at the bottom. And so salaries was the biggest cut. The second is that I moved, there's been a grant in the mayor's office since at least the time of Mayor Hagan. He used it at the time to help fund little things that people needed help for kind of at the last minute if folks wanted to put on a small community event. What I did is I rolled that over and created the festival committee that now gives out grants to community festivals, Billings Park Day, South End Days, the Spooktacular, organizations like that get little grants. I moved that out of the mayor's office and I put it in our grants tab where it really belongs. The second you asked about was Public Works Shop. That is, I probably should have made a slide about that. That's a pretty significant change. For years, pretty much as long as anybody can remember, the shop has had a budget for all of the vehicle repairs, the labor and the parts for fixing every vehicle in the city with the exception of the fire department, who has their own mechanic and budget for it. That means that all the squads, all the building inspection vehicles, anybody that's, even the staff that have vehicles, it gets fixed in the shop, and they have a budget for that. Where that isn't the most efficient is that means that Len, our mechanic, is the one that has to say, hey, take it easy on your vehicle. This is costing a lot. It's his budget that gets blown when the rest of us don't take care of our vehicles. I'm not calling anybody irresponsible, but if somebody's irresponsible with their vehicle, I want their department head to answer for it, because if building inspectors are running roughshod over the building inspection vehicles, or an even better example, the police department, which has the most vehicles, if an officer is not treating a squad car appropriately, Len can't say anything to that officer, but the police chief definitely can. And so those expenses you will now find in those departmental budgets. The police chief is in charge of his maintenance budget. On the other side of Public Works, Nathan is in charge of the streets department budget. Every department that has a vehicle has now a maintenance budget. That is roughly the average, I think a little bit less of what it's been over the last 10 years. I'm sorry, you also asked about the attorney. I'm going to put a pin in that one because that's a discussion we'll have as part of the surplus. Any other questions I can answer about the general fund? Councilor Fennessy.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on Councilor Elm's question there. The other one is the fire department. It looks like there's like 25,000 less.
I don't remember the specific. Oh, yes, fire department. It'll be harder to notice in police because we added a lot back in police, but there's a similar cut there too. In every department, we took out capital spending and expenses from the general fund. The previous process had us go through the line items that you see in your budget documents. Then we would go through a secondary process where department heads would present capital equipment and capital expenditures. Very few departments have these. Police, fire, and public works are really the only ones that have those. But they're capital, and so they're large expenses, and they're very erratic. Sometimes the fire department needs to buy a lot of turnout gear or scuba equipment, or the police department needs to purchase weapons or ERT vests. And it's thousands of dollars in swings year to year. So what we did, and you'll see this when we get to the CIP, we added those costs to the revolving funding of those departments in the CIP. We didn't actually reduce them, though. The CIP was looking healthy enough that I just took everything they asked for and dumped it in that revolving fund. They all were pretty typical requests. Nobody was asking for anything crazy over the next couple of years. So that's what you're noticing is previous years had all those expenses built in.
Wouldn't that been paid for out of the CIP, the scuba gear, all of that?
I think maybe the scuba gear specifically, but there's some general equipment. I was just using that as an example, but turnout gear, trying to think of other examples. Fire departments had some building expenses, but they were one of the big ones for capital.
Building expenses in the general fund?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Usually small repairs and remodels.
Sure. Yeah, that don't meet the
Not
test
the
for
roof.
the CIP.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was anything that was below a certain threshold. I can't remember if that was $5,000 or $10,000. And so they needed to buy something. It was less than this. So now we're just going to have revolving funding. That said, well, and I'll talk more about that in CIP. Other questions?
Mayor Payne.
Councilor Sutherland, I think.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation too, by the way. I got a question for you on the pie charts that we do. I noticed this year we joined together public safety, which looks like we put in fire and police in the same category on that pie chart. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way, I'm sure I could if I did the math too, but is there any way, maybe after the meeting or something, you could email me what those, or Director Putz, if you could, which one, if you broke it up into police and fire, what percent is each one?
So a percentage we might be able to do. I don't think that is actually broken out in the budget, but it's fairly simple math. If you take the total cost of those departments and divide it by the total expenditures of the general fund, you're going to get not the percentage, but it'll be reflected as a decimal. So multiply that number by 100, and you've got the percentage.
All right. I was wondering why we changed it from prior years. That's about it. Thank you.
That was really just a semantic change, and I actually was expecting that question. Why not break out every single department? The answer is most of them are very small, and it's I tried to look at it from how the public perceives what we do. Obviously, those of us in this room are familiar with the intricacies of all the different departments, but the public thinks a little broader. Now, obviously, they know the difference between the police department and the fire department. They may ask that question directly, but that answer is in the budget. It does say how much we spend on police. And we might even be able to add those percentages in.
That's no problem. Thank you.
Other questions? I'm going to move on to the CIP, but if
Mayor,
Councilor Allen,
I
please.
just have one more question. And it was sent along the general fund budget draft, and there was the changes needed area for the net new construction and levy effect. I noticed in future years that number keeps going up. I mean, with the COVID-19, are we still anticipating net new construction to be increasing?
Oh, yes. Okay. I can say that pretty confidently. The COVID had only a minimal impact on construction throughout 2020. In fact, most of the people that are doing that kind of construction want to keep doing it. So there's really two types of things, and Brad could explain this better, and I'd encourage you to ask about the future of net new construction because it's, and our equalized value because it's pretty relevant to our future budget planning. But it breaks out into construction in Superior happens in two ways. Large developments that make the news and that you see rising on street fronts, and the little stuff, all the little improvements to homes that people take out permits for, and kind of everything in between, I guess. That stuff's just been happening pretty regularly. We've still seen decent permits being pulled, and none of our major construction projects got derailed. In fact, while I'm not ready to announce anything tonight, we have more large construction projects starting to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I will move on to our capital improvement plan. First, your priorities. This was obviously more complicated to mete out. Councilor Elm asked me a lot of detailed questions about where we came up with this process and why we use things like a 25% added weight and 50%. Part of it, it's a complicated, flowing document that is not, I keep calling it a 5-year document, but in reality, it's a 7-year document because it incorporates years past. And if you really wanted to get in the weeds, it's even older than that. There's a lot of existing funds that just stay alive for years to come. So getting your priorities on that was relatively difficult, and I wanted to give weight to the things that this council and previous councils have said were important to them before. And so I gave descending weight. The existing projects had the most. The projects that were deferred last year got more than new projects because you took a vote and you said it was important to you last year, so I made it more important this year. And new projects had to just come up on straight point value, and so people had to really value something to elevate it to make it brand new. The idea behind that is the CIP should be a very considered document. We make these choices slowly over the course of years. These are very large investments, so we don't want to be just investing in something that's thrilling us today. There should be, unless it's of such overwhelming priority to the council, that they elevate it that way. So if we said something was important last year, if it stays important next year, we want to start moving it up. So I see that deferred list as the real waiting list. Doesn't always work that way, though. A lot of things fall off of that deferred list, I think, because maybe the shine wears off of it, maybe it seems less important the next year, and then the deferred list has done its job. How your priorities shook out. Not a lot of surprises here. For the most part, you valued existing funding. I am also pleased with these priorities. There was a lot of consensus built around the things that I believe are most important to citizens, namely general street maintenance, park improvements, building maintenance, your public safety vehicles and sidewalks, all rated very highly. However, you do see the sidewalk clearing equipment was valued higher than several existing funds. That was ranked 4th overall with the weight, and if we just go on the points alone, that was weighted 3rd overall, receiving 55 points among the counselors with their ratings, and 7 of 10 counselors supported the sidewalk clearing equipment. So in terms of what was funded, that's the biggest thing. I added that to the CIP. That we will purchase $150,000, purchase that this year. We were able to cut from some funds in 2020 that we haven't spent and it doesn't look like we will spend to make that a little less. It does say 2020 in here, or I'm sorry, it does say $150,000 in here though. The other big change here is something that we started working on last year, and that's the revolving funding. You'll see down under essential, I'm sorry, I'm going to move ahead. This is the revenue line. We can come back to that if you have questions. The expenditures, when you look down on your sheet, you should all have it, the big CIP sheet. Under essential, towards the bottom, you see revolving capital equipment improvements. That's a title change. It's got 3 categories, basically fire, police, public works, parks, etc. What we did is, this was the conversation we had earlier in the year about the CIP to say, rather than us figure out how much we need in vehicles and how much we need in building inspections and have the chiefs come and ask a deliberate ask for every piece of turnout gear or vests, let's make a fund that if we fund it adequately, it can cover the expenses that those departments need for the next 5 years. Then it puts accountability on the directors of those departments to budget appropriately. I recognize that those budgets will change. This is an approximation. For example, Councillor Fennessy's question about a decrease in the fire department. In the police department, the police chief brought forward a pretty comprehensive budget for what capital equipment he's going to need in the next year, and he has a good idea of what he'll need 2 years from now and 3 years from now, but then it kind of drops off, as you would expect. Hard to predict what you need in the next couple of years. I figured it's going to be pretty similar, and so I took what they asked for this year, basically moved it on over the next few years. In the case of the fire department, that's an even simpler calculation. It's the cost of the lease for engine 1 plus the cost of all of the vehicles that the chief needs over the next 5 years divided by 5. So it creates a revolving fund that will be allowed to be built up, and both of these funds have a little more than that. So does Public Works, so that as things come up, they can purchase the things that they need. And if they can save money, they get to roll it over for larger expenses. The idea, as larger expenses come up, we need to make these funds healthier. So while you see, for example, in the police department is $255,000, I don't expect that fund to be at $255,000 at the beginning of 2022. I expect it to grow. I don't expect the police chief to spend all of that. He will buy more police cars in some years than others. Some years it will get drawn down. The best comparison I have for this is our enterprise funds, which the Finance Committee, I believe, will see at its next meeting. We have direct revenue that comes in the form of fees for those, and in this case, in the form of CIP funding, creates a fund. The fund builds up until it can pay for the things that it needs to pay for. Now, this does not mean that any of these three directors has carte blanche to spend whatever they want to spend. By making this more general, it takes at least a little bit of the transparency out of the spending. So what I am going to ask the departments to do, and it'll be on you to hold me to this, but before the end of this year, we will, each of these departments will have to submit a budget for how they are going to spend their money in the next year, and a proposal for how they will spend it over the course of the next 4 years. This is exactly the same way we do the CIP. It's exactly the same way that Director Roberts constructs the budgets for stormwater and wastewater, how the landfill constructs its budget. It will be a long-term budget. The Finance Committee will review it. The Council will formally adopt the 2021 budget. They will say, yes, we approve this, or no, we don't. Or they'll make amendments, and that will be the chief's budget. It will be less complicated in the CIP, more complicated in the individual budgets going forward. It's a chance to bring more light and accountability on those funds while protecting them in the long term. I don't have too much more to say about the CIP. Obviously, there are questions remaining about the terminal tax. We don't have that number yet. We're hopeful, but our best guess a couple months ago, felt like a couple years ago, was that we might see an increase this year. I'm not optimistic for that. I'm not even hopeful for it. It's possible, but there's a good chance it'll go down again next year. We don't know what the effects of COVID are on the Enbridge Corporation, but COVID has not been kind to the oil industry. And so it's probably wise of us to both keep our future expenditures low and to keep our contingency as high as possible. Left a $100,000 contingency in there. One thing I want to point out in revenue is our bonding begins to decrease. That is something that will improve the stability of this fund in the future. It will look like we have less revenue, but on the whole, we'll also have less bond issuance costs, but it gives more flexibility. You saw our debt profile. We can add bonding in the future if we want. I don't want to project for bonding right now. I don't know what our needs are 2 or 3 years, and I can't adequately say what our needs are in 2023, let alone beyond that. If something becomes very urgent, that option, we have that option if we keep our debt profile lower. Okay, questions about the CIP? Councilor Elm.
All right. What was presented in February was the CIP up till 2025, and that's what's presented here today. So this is merely an update from what we done in February. I think you touched on that earlier. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's, in fact, I believe I warned you that we would be updating it at some point in this calendar year. That needed an update to correct for some funds. The biggest reason we needed an update is the terminal tax comes in the actual calendar year. So the money that comes in, we don't know what our 2020 allocation is. So what happened is our 2019 allocation was down, and we had to make adjustments to cover that deficit. So we came back and rallied and made those adjustments. Now this is sort of the formal version. We've done that most years, where we've made a provisional one once we get our accurate CIP number, our terminal tax number, revenues get adjusted, and then we come back. There's a bunch of reasons to do this twice a year, and I would hope we don't have to do it too early in 2021, but these are large projects. They have large swings. There are a lot of considerations that will revenue alone is very uncertain.
We'll touch base on that next year, and the 2026 column will appear then Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we updated at the beginning of the year, we didn't need to add 25. We just did. We decided to be forward-looking with the document. So the next one you see will have 26 on it.
And another question, we got the fire rigs on here for $255,000 a year. And later on our agenda is a lease for $144,000. Is this going to cover the future rigs as well, or is this something that's going to need to be increased as time goes on?
Eventually, it may cover the future rigs. So what this covers, it covers the lease payment for what you will approve later tonight, hopefully, and it will cover that for the next 5 years. And if this doesn't change, it will cover it for the whole life of the lease. Future rigs are future policy decisions. We aren't due for another rig purchase until 2026, and so we will start to consider that next year. I would caution that we won't fully consider how we will purchase that rig at that point. That's a very large capital purchase with a lot of different potential opportunities for how we buy it. For example, we didn't buy, you were seeing we're not purchasing engine 1 with cash, we're leasing it. Mm-hmm. That's on the table for engine 3 as well as our grant opportunities. But the biggest reason is I have no clue what the world looks like in 2026. And it's very difficult to speak for those counselors, that mayor. Just as kind of an intellectual exercise, I went back and I'd encourage you to do it too. Look at what the CIP looks like 5 years ago, and it's so radically different that it seems absurd to plan policy that far ahead. That's why this kind of drops off. It gets pretty misty into the future. What this does in the fire department is, and I think it's fairly ambitious, we asked the chief to say, what do you need? What are all of your needs going into forever? I think it was something like 20, 30 years. And what does that look like? What I did is I looked at what do we need in the next 5 years. Every vehicle that the fire chief said he needs in the next 5 years can be funded at full cost with this revolving fund.
All right, perfect, thanks.
Councilor Sweeney.
Thank you. I'll reserve most of my questions for later, but the airplane, Castro?
Castro,
paying
yes.
that debt on?
Yeah.
Who are we paying that debt to?
We took out a bond for that, and so it's just like any other debt we have in the city. It was, somebody took out a municipal bond, and now we owe them the money.
Okay. Just like to know what the interest rate on that is. It's kind of off the top. I apologize.
I can email you.
Okay, fine. Because we got 4 times 4 is 16, 1.6. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this document? Then I will move on. Finally, the 2019 budget surplus. I told you where this came from. The total, I didn't write down the total, but quick math was at $385,000. I'm proposing 4 sources for it, all of them to increase the fiscal stability of the city. The first is the answer to Councilor Elm's question during the general fund. The liability insurance fund is it's a large fund that we keep in the city to cover any potential liabilities. We get an assessment of what our potential liabilities are expected to be, and then we are obligated to set aside that amount in the fund. Right now, that's about $100,000 in deficit, but this is a tricky point. It's a paper deficit because we are required to hold the amount of expected liabilities in the fund. We haven't actually incurred those liabilities yet. It's just looking at historical data and what they think we might spend. So we don't actually owe anybody $100,000 right now. We're not short, but we do have an obligation to have that money in there. We could have built that up over time, but a deficit is not a great thing to hold on the city's books, and so I'm proposing wiping out that deficit. The other $50,000 is to Councilor Elm's question about the attorney's budget. One of the things that had been in the city attorney's general fund departmental budget for years was I forget what exact line item it was in. It was either professional legal services, contracted services, or a little bit of both. Whenever we get engaged in major litigation, somebody sues us or we sue them, it's usually very, very expensive. And you have to bring in a lot of professionals. In the case of Walmart, we had to bring in a lot of assessment professionals, evaluation professionals. We usually have outside counsel when there's a major lawsuit. The problem with that fund is, with that line item, unlike almost every other line item in the city, this one swings wildly. If you look at salaries, it's about the same as any given year. It goes up or down a little. If you look at the fuel and oil budget, the office supplies, all of that stuff stays pretty stable. This could be $150,000 one year, nothing the next. Really tough to budget for that in the general fund, and you hurt the rest of your fund when you try to put enough in to meet it. So if we're preparing for the worst, like I think it was Springbrook or the Walmart litigation, that's less money that we can go towards other priorities. If you don't prepare for that, we get walloped when the big lawsuit comes, and they always come. The solution is we're going to start paying it out of the liability insurance fund. When we have a liability, either to pay an attorney or to pay out a settlement, that's where we're going to pay it from. But we need to put in extra money to make sure to cover that. So what I'm doing is, if you look in the attorney's budget, there is a small amount left. It's actually, I think, hiding out in transfers to other funds, not the attorney's budget, where we will transfer to this every single year a small amount. That equates to about the average of what we're spending over X period. I can't remember if it's 5 or 10 years, but we're going to seed it because one, we went in deficit on that program. We actually started this last year. We went in deficit right away because of Walmart. And so I'm going to pay back that deficit with this surplus and seed it even more, and it will continue to grow. If we get a good year next year, it's going to get even healthier and continue to do so until we get that next big lawsuit or until we need more professional services out of legal. Second is the property revaluation fund. This could have gone in the CIP very easily. And the reason I didn't is because I still don't fully know the future of the revaluation. It's probably coming. We should hold on to some money for it. But to put it in the CIP has a date. It sits in a certain year. And I don't know that we'll be doing this in 2022 or 2024. So I wanted to create a fund where it will just sit there and it will wait until we need a revaluation. If we have future surpluses and the future starts to look more grim and it looks like, by the way, this was the assessor's recommendation for about how much he thought it would cost. But if we get 2-3 years out and it starts looking like a $500,000 cost, we'll start beefing it up with other money. But the fund will sit there. The other thing I worried about a little bit, what if we funded this thing in 23? We get around to 23, there's been a couple of elections, and people are like, we didn't spend that, let's go raid the money and spend it on something else. This is just my way of kind of hiding it from anybody that gets greedy. But there it is, you know where it is. We have money set aside for revaluation when that's necessary. The illegal taxes fund, exact same story as outside counsel and the attorney's fee. This is when we assess the wrong taxes and we got to pay it back. That amount is often a very large amount. It's not even always our mistake. Sometimes the state makes that mistake when they're assessing on manufacturing properties, but we're the ones that got to pay it back. And sometimes you'll remember the AMSOIL settlement. It ended up being a very large amount. But again, most years it's nothing at all, unless it's $100,000. So we're going to create a fund. I'm going to seed it with this money. It will start at $85,000, and we will transfer a small amount in every year to continue to beef that up. We will have to review this next time we get a major settlement to make sure it's healthy. Again, think of it like an enterprise fund. Finally, the hotel motel fund. This poor little fund is probably our only real victim of COVID. And we've talked, as a council, we've talked about the hotel motel fund a lot. We've spent a lot of money out of it. We've funded a lot of cool programs. People have had a lot of great ideas that they get so excited about, and it's this really great fund for us to spend on really whatever we want. I know not everybody likes that language, but I do. It's a chance to really fund cool stuff in the city when it comes up, and I appreciate that we've had that flexibility to award little grants here and there when something interesting comes along. Well, that fund is hurting, and there's people that are already expecting the money. So with the balance, after I did what I felt was most important for the fiscal health of the city, felt let's put a little bit more into making the world a little bit brighter as we come out of the pandemic. That, counselors, is my presentation. Can I answer any questions about any of this right now before we go into the business?
Question, please.
Sorry, did somebody on the phone have a question?
No.
Yeah, Keith,
Counselor Kern.
can you hear me?
Yeah, barely. Speak up just a bit.
All right, just a quick question on hotel motel. That 35,000, is that going to be obligated to follow the state statute as far as when we collect it and the disbursement to the other entities in there? Or is that just for cash influx to that fund?
No, so that's an existing, the fund is called Hotel Motel Fund because it's where our share of the hotel motel tax goes. What I'm doing is just putting extra money in it. So these aren't hotel motel taxes, they're just going into the same fund that the hotel motel taxes go. So no, this is not subject to any of those statutes or disbursements. You get to do with this whatever you want.
Right.
Any other questions?
I do.
Tell them to go ahead. Go ahead, Counselor.
I do have one question with the CIP, and it has to do with the Project X. We're going to spend $400,000, and at the end of the year, we end up spending $300,000. So my question is, what happens to the $100,000?
It's a very good question and a lucrative one often. Eventually we close out the account. Once we're certain that the project is done, it comes back as revenue. Ashley, is that line sitting in revenue right now? That recaptured money from previous funds?
Is that in revenue?
I think you're probably talking about the, I know it is on here. I think it's in 2023. I'm having a hard time.
Well, I'm not talking about any specific item.
Right.
Okay. Just if the project costs us, we have a budget of 300, costs us, what happens to that 100,000 that we did not spend?
So
Does that stay, does it go up to the,
yeah, so the short answer is it becomes revenue for future years. We recapture it.
Right, if that project is for sure done, and I think maybe what Jack is questioning, for instance, if it's like a street maintenance account, we continue to have street maintenance, so that's an ongoing project, and so in that case, the money remains in their account because we're still doing street maintenance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if there's a definitive, it depends what Project X is, because if it's build a building, at some point the building is built and the fund is closed, and we can, if there's leftover funds, we can go and recapture that. We declare it closed, and the money comes back in as revenue. But general street maintenance and several of these things are revolving funds, and they continue to grow. That's why I'm suggesting their budgets should be submitted to finance every single year, so because you'll start to see balances accumulate.
that's where I thought that was a play off what you said, because if there's a balance there, $100,000, that should come back somewhere. We just shouldn't stick it into X, Y, Z. Okay, thank you. And I don't know if we have a policy on that, but I'd like to work on that too. Thank you.
We should probably put these budgets into policy anyways. Councilor.
All right, rolling back to the surplus, I guess I do have a question. This is the first year that we're using these surplus funds, and just want a little more background of why these items were chosen or how you came about. Were they just the biggest needs? Are we setting a precedent of sorts since this is a first time?
Well, no, I don't think we're setting a precedent. The reason I chose these is, first and foremost, we wanted to take care of the fiscal health of the city. They also protect the long-term health of the general fund. One of the biggest frustrations for me in our budgets was those things that swung so wildly. I don't want to pay $100,000 in a budget where we're trying to invest in new priorities. I don't want to put $100,000 into an expense that may never happen. Best way to do that is set aside money for a rainy day. So a good way to think about it is we invested money in previous budgets in things like outside legal counsel that we didn't spend. We invested in illegal taxes that we didn't spend. And so symbolically, to me, it adds up. we ended up not spending all of our 2019 budget. And so the money that we didn't spend, I'm effectively putting into an account to spend it later when we will need it. But really, it was about responsible things to do. We needed to fix a couple of these deficits. We know we will have these large expenses at some point in the future. We just don't know when. So really was just setting aside money for a rainy day. Would have been great to do something really fun with it, but we've got a pretty good budget and CIP already. We're already doing some pretty exciting things. So let's plug a couple holes.
Well, that makes great sense. Thanks. So in future years, this could look drastically different then in terms of the needs that if we have a surplus, how it's fed.
I mean, the amount could look drastically different. We could have a deficit. We could have $1 million surplus.
And it doesn't necessarily go to these particular items. It's whatever is presented.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Councilor Sweeney again.
Thank you. One last question. For 2019, the budget, a few $100,000, what percentage is that?
A very small one.
Well, that's a tribute, that's what I thought it was, pretty small, and I think it's smaller than I thought. So that's a tribute to the budgeting process.
I hope so.
Yeah, I do too, and so, do you know roughly, is it 2 point something?
You remember 2019 expenditures?
That's okay. I'll get it after. That's fine.
I'm going to say 30 million. No, we should have it.
That we're not over budgeting things, so we come with 15% over budget, and because that's not the way to budget.
That is my thought exactly. That's been my approach to budgeting. I have the amount, and as long as we're here, we'll play trivia. What was the surplus amount? 367?
Yeah, 385,500, call it.
Divided by 30.05. It's about 1%. Probably could have done that in my head. Okay. Councilor Fennessy.
So maybe you answered this and I just missed it. That's a very real possibility. So on Councilor Sweeney's question, when we go under, we've got, I understand streets, one year, if we budget $1 million for streets every year, 1 year we might spend 900,000, 1 year we might spend 1.1. There are some projects in here where it's a one-time, either a build or whatever. So let's even take the first one that I see is the Moccasin Mike road culverts. The budgeted amount was $949,841. It's pretty slim chance that we nailed that number and we weren't over, weren't under. So in that case, there's no other future years to just let it slide into. So whether we were over, under, whatever for that project, where does that money go? Where do you see it? Because if we were under, let's say $50,000, I don't see $50,000 in revenue.
Right. So I think I can show you. Now, it might, Ashley might do this differently, and it might show up as revenue, but look at another example. Look at the Hammond Avenue reconstruction, phase 2. And when you look further out, you see in 2024 that costs $1,575,000. But under it, highlighted, you see a negative $1.2 million. That's a result of a grant. So what she did, she just boxed it right in there, and the actual cost is the sum of, or the remainder of 1.575 million minus 1.2 million.
Yeah, but that's not the actual cost because that's still a projection.
Right. But if the remaining costs, and again, she might do this differently. You can tell me otherwise as you walk up here. She might adjust the amount right under the previous year. When you see it, if there's a surplus, put that amount right underneath and adjust the cost, unless you do it completely different.
Sure, yeah, no. So major street projects have their own account number, and so let's say that one has a little bit left over at the end of the year. That just becomes contingency for other major street projects. Sometimes they go over budget a little bit, and so there's always a little bit of a balance that is a little bit extra in that account, and it just helps, because of course sometimes we're going to be a little over, sometimes we're going to be a little under. And so that just carries forward. So all those like similar projects are usually grouped together in an account number together.
We're going to see it as revenue if there's truly just projects done, came in under budget, it's got money left sitting in the account. One, we got to go back and find it. We have to kind of audit those accounts, and once we find it, we make it part of next year's CIP. It'll probably sit. These are rare and small amounts, but they'll probably sit under miscellaneous revenue there.
Yeah, and I'll even throw in the opposite sometimes happens. So the Superior Public Library, they don't typically have a ton of stuff going on year to year. And when they finally wrapped up their renovations in 19, we knew ultimately what their account was in deficit by. And so we added that $110,000 because that was exactly what they were over by. And they don't have annual funding that can help offset contingencies. And so we had to ultimately fund it. And that's that highlighted amount there. So again, and that's every project. Sometimes we're a little over, sometimes we're a little under. And the accounts that have a lot of projects running through them, a lot of times they just tend to even out, so it's usually not a big issue.
Okay, so even, sorry, go ahead if you were.
Oh, no.
So if I understand you right, whether we're over on a project or under, let's say we're building a public works new garage and we go either over or we go under, that just kind of gets absorbed in the much bigger picture?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think there's probably, I don't think there's a real good clear-cut example here. But I know in years past, if there is, let's say, a ton of money left over, and if it was wildly over creating a large amount in that account, we would want to redistribute and kind of recall it revenue again, because it's an amount we don't need anymore in that account. And so we do review those account numbers, and a lot of them do have rolling forward amounts, but they have large projects still remaining in them. So each year we do check for projects that if there's an account number and they don't have projects sizing up to the amount in their account, we need to do something about it.
Okay, and then that would just get slid in under miscellaneous revenue if it's overage and if it's...
Yep, it'd show up in the revenue section.
Okay, thanks.
I believe I heard Councilor Sutherland asking to speak before.
He's sleeping. No, not me. I'm sorry.
Does anybody else have any questions, any more questions about any of these three proposals? Okay, then my recommendation to you, councilors, is to move to postpone until the September, all three proposals, items 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4, until the September 15th meeting.
I will make that motion.
So moved.
The motion is by Councilor Sweeney, second by Councilor Fennessy, to postpone all three items until September 15th. Is there discussion? Again, councilors, I would strongly encourage you to set up time to go over this budget, ask more questions, have discussion in the next 2 weeks. Hearing no further discussion or questions, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Aye. Motion carries.
The mayor is recommending approval to appoint Nicole Teasley to the library board for a 3-year term.
Motion is by Councilor Elman, second by Councilor Bender. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, councilors.
7.1, the Human Resources Committee, August 17th meeting didn't have any recommendations for approval, but report from the chair.
So this is one of the new features of this agenda. Because they had a meeting, I'm asking the chair, Councilor Ludwig, if you have a report from the Human Resource Committee.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At our August 17th meeting, we approved the request to fill an ESD Environmental Engineering Tech 2 position and subsequent vacancies that may arise if the position is filled in-house. Vacancy is due to a resignation. We also approved requests from the IT department to fill 2 part-time student workers / intern positions. These positions will assist in our migration from our old to our new building inspection software. And finally, we invited Finance Director Putz and IT Director Shea to the meeting to review and begin discussion on RW Group's recommendations 13 and 22 regarding technology and integrated payroll and timekeeping software. Can I answer any questions on any of those items?
Are there any questions for the chair? Thank you, Counselor. Well done.
Item 7.2 is the Public Works Committee recommendations from the August 19th meeting. Is there a report from the chair?
I do. Thanks, Terry. Well, it's hard to believe that we are now knocking on September. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of some of the things that we've done this year and what we covered last meeting. So since the beginning of the year, we have considered 5 parking ordinances, and the majority of those are eliminating calendar parking. We've had 3 batches of vehicle auction removed. We've had a minimum of 13 reports. We have considered 7 stop signs across 5 districts. We've had additional work around considering sidewalk elimination, sidewalk clearing machines on the policy, and 1 vector truck purchased. Again, not all inclusive, but we've gotten a lot done despite not even meeting in March or April. So one of the first things you probably noticed when you read the Public Works Minutes report is that they were 5 pages long. It starts with a pair of ordinance recommendations presented by the School Resource Liaison Officer, particularly around Cooper and the high school. We're recommending those be approved to create a consistent expectation of traffic patterns in the neighborhood by replacing fold-out stop signs that exist there now. Item 4 also creates some consistency for the length of the corridor. Half of this street is exempt from calendar parking and half of it isn't. It's a wide street and not an emergency route. And we had the blessing of the counselor in this district as well. So similar to Hammond, the entire corridor will be exempt from calendar parking April 1st through October 31st. And quite frankly, this is a policy option that we will likely see more broadly exercised by Public Works. The next is an ongoing effort to rehabilitate a rural-urban conflict, and we are collecting a lot of data and looking towards a long-term collaboration of law enforcement and demonstration markings by Public Works. So this will be a recurring discussion point, likely for several months, and we have a plan to gradually increase the infrastructure until the desired outcome in that neighborhood is at least nearly achieved out there in South End. We had 1 item held because we have several stop sign considerations on this street. So we'll take that up again next month, hopefully with both of those counselors, so we can discuss the best outcome there. The next is the contract. As many of you know, building inspection has been short, and this agreement passed unanimously. And of course, finally, the sidewalk clearing equipment. Public Works has been talking about this for the better part of 2 years, and we accept the recommendations of our street supervisor and thank Nathan for his multi-city research and meeting and coming to the meeting to talk about this and how we can improve and expand our existing sidewalk clearing program, which currently consists of about 4.3 miles. Currently, Public Works and Parks are mapping the best options within the established safe routes to schools to strategically isolate corridors and track the challenges both above and below, so namely buckles and branches. You probably read in the mix meeting minutes, although this isn't Public Works, you do have 3 counselors that serve on that committee, that you probably noticed there was an extensive pedestrian research happening where more than 600 residents participated in this survey. And the number 1 policy with a choice of 12 that these residents identified as important to pedestrian parity was snow clearing from sidewalks. So it's a comforting statistic that eases, any doubt around this mandate. But more so, it's an exciting opportunity. So more than 600 people took the survey, and when everybody was considered, more than 60% of the respondents said that the number 1 priority was to clear snow from sidewalks. And when you isolate it to just Superior, that percentage jumps to more than 77%. And if you wanted to know more about the policies that ranked very highly, I would be happy to talk about them indefinitely, but that's all I have. Thanks.
Are there any questions for the chair?
Mayor, may I?
Councilor Sutherland.
Thank you. Councilor Van Sickle, I appreciate that report there, and I want to thank the Public Works Committee for approving stop signs around Cooper School. The one side, Wyoming Avenue, has been a fold-out for a while now, and the whole traffic pattern there has changed ever since the reconstruction. Moving the school back about 1,000 feet has really changed the traffic patterns on foot and vehicle. So I appreciate you considering that, and on Missouri Avenue too. So I just want to thank the committee for approving that, and I want to thank the Officer Trone and the liaison officer for putting their head out there and requesting that. So thank you.
Are there any other questions for the chair? Seeing none, because we have ordinances, we have to read those individually.
Okay. The Public Works Committee recommended approval of an ordinance introduced by the Public Works Department amending the traffic code, creating a four-way stop at Wyoming Avenue and North 18th Street.
Motion to approve.
Motion is by Councilor Sutherland, the second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries.
They also recommended approval of an ordinance amending the traffic code to create a four-way stop at Missouri Avenue and North 18th Street.
Motion to approve.
Motion is by Councilor Sutherland, the second by Councilor Bender. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Also recommended an ordinance amending the traffic code to exclude streets from calendar parking by adding North 5th Street, April 1st through October 31st only, to seasonally exempt all of North 5th Street from calendar parking from April 1st to October 31st.
Motion to approve.
Motion is by Councilor Dahlbeck, the second by Councilor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Aye.
Recommending approval of an ordinance to amend the traffic code stops by creating a three-way stop at North 54th Street and Hammond Avenue for north, south, and eastbound traffic.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion is by Councilor Ledeen, the second by Councilor Bender. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
They recommended approval of a professional plan review services agreement with John Frischman on an as-needed basis.
Motion is by Councilor Elm, second by Councilor Bender. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Aye.
Did you want to see if there were any more?
Yeah. Are there any other standing committee chairs that would that wish to give a report? Are there any other meetings or anything else coming up anybody needs to say?
No.
Move on to special committees.
Okay. Plan Commission recommendation from August 19th. Report from the chair.
My report, councilors, is very brief, I promise. Want to point out, I think you've heard this already, but the Small Business Grant Fund has been exhausted for the year. We will be reviewing the Economic Development Fund budget very shortly, and we'll bring forward a recommendation for how much to fund. I don't want to say if, we will be funding that. I think it's been a very successful program. I'm excited to know this is a policy in the very early stages. Our planning department, especially our housing coordinator, we're going to work with Councilor Ledeen to explore a PACE program for housing, property assessed clean energy, to attempt to give people a little bit more leverage to try and take out loans to improve the energy efficiency of their homes. I can't answer any questions about it whatsoever because it's still, that's where we're at, is asking questions. And so hopefully we can discuss that at the Plan Commission in the coming months. You'll see several items of business, including the approval of our final small business grant for the year for Lee's Pizza and some other business for some certified survey maps. Unless you have significant questions, my recommendation is that you approve the entirety of the business of the Plan Commission.
So moved.
The motion is by Councilor Bender, the second by Councilor Dahlbeck to approve the balance of item 8.1. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
The motion carries.
There is no old business. New business. 10.1, Housing Coordinator Planner Screens is recommending approval for Roydan Rentals LLC to purchase and rehabilitate 4303 East First Street.
The motion is by Counselor Fennessy, the second by Counselor Ludwig. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Aye.
Finance Director Putz is recommending approval of the 2020 Nemaji Golf Course Capital Plan Budget and the purchase of a John Deere tractor through Kemper Sports Preferred Pricing.
The motion is by Counselor Elm, the second by Counselor Bender. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Motion carries.
10.3, Fire Chief Gordon is recommending approval of a resolution authorizing proper city officials to enter into a lease purchase agreement with community leasing partners for financing one new Rosenbauer King Cobra articulation platform.
Motion is by Counselor Fennessy, second by Counselor Elm. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
10.4 is the resolution introduced by the Public Works Director setting a public hearing on September 15th to declare an intent to exercise special assessment powers to blacktop alleys listed in the resolving clause of the resolution.
Motion is by Counselor Fennessy, second by Counselor Bender. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
Item 10.5 is a resolution approving to borrow from the trust funds of the state of Wisconsin the sum of $1,925,000 for the purpose of refinancing 2011 promissory notes and a portion of remaining 2011 taxable bonds and for no other purpose.
Motion is by Counselor Elm, the second by Counselor Bender. Is there discussion? Counselor Sweeney.
This was brought up last month, I believe, and it's, what changed?
I believe we were just missing some part of the resolution, but Director Putz.
Yeah, part of the resolution hadn't been included in the packet, and so the state trust fund loan is very specific about the order of things, and so we had to get that additional piece in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Motion carries.
10.6 is a resolution providing for the prepayment and redemption of a portion of the outstanding $6,800,000 taxable general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2011A, and the outstanding $2,655,000 general obligation promissory notes, Series 2011D.
Motion is by Counselor Bender, second by Counselor Elm. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
The motion carries. We have no further business, right? And we are adjourned. Thank you, counselors.
Good night, everybody.